On today's episode, we're going to talk about virtual funerals. Benny boy, we're going to talk about the new age.
Let's step into the future.
Let's talk about death, baby. Let's talk about grief and mourning. Is it argumental or existential? What's it mean to me? Let's talk about death.
Hi, I'm Benny Capal, and I'm a funeral professional.
And I'm Nicholas Capal, psychologist.
Hey, Nick, let's talk about death.
Let's do it.
All right, Doc, I want you to put on your future goggles.
I got my VR set
You gotta-
on.
We're going to talk a little bit today about what is possibly going to be trending here for funerals in the near future. We know with the pandemic that virtual funerals are a bigger thing, right? And I think that's never going to change now. We set it up. You know, a lot of funeral homes have a consistent one going on at all times. And now with the world being so spread out, it's not going to change, right? There's always somebody who can benefit most likely from a virtual funeral. So we know that's there. What we're seeing though is virtual reality funerals, Nick. How about that? So let's talk. Let me set the stage for you. So imagine Uncle Louie dies, and you can't come. You're too busy, work, whatever. However you want to address the problem. So you put on your new virtual reality goggles, and so basically we set the stage. So maybe the family decides they want it to look like a church. So you're in the pew, you stand up, you maybe go up to the front. There's the casket maybe, or a picture with the urn, which I think is very interesting because does it really matter at that point? I don't know. This is just my brain is doing this. And then you can literally have the pastor come in on a green screen behind him and do the eulogy from the pulpit or whatnot. And then maybe you can go to the side, Nick, and light a candle. And then that would be the funeral. You leave, and that's it. Maybe you can have a board. There's a board where you could write stuff on or leave personal messages or whatnot. But then you could also have it this way, right? You put on your Google. I'm sorry, we're not sponsored by Google. We put on our virtual reality lenses, the Capal lenses, and you're in a campsite, Doc. And there's a tent next to you, and you see there's a log placed by the fire with an urn with your loved one's picture, and yet again, candles. You light a candle, and then you can set off a firework, maybe, or you can, and then the family on the other side can see who all lit candles, who was all attending this. So not only is there the side of it as a guest, but there's also the side of it as a family, like you having this. Here's my struggle, Doc, and I know we've already talked about this. We're already stepping away from person to person, right? It's getting more where you don't have to step out of the house, which is convenient. I'm not saying it's not, and I'm not necessarily saying this is a bad thing. What I'm saying is, for me, I think we're losing yet again more of the reason why we have visitations, why we have funerals, the community based, right? Now, some people could fight that and say, well, why can't we have a virtual community, right? But this is where the future is going, right? We already know that we can do like these 3D like basically 3D videos of us. So like, Doc, you could tape yourself, and then later on somebody could use that as a three-dimensional virtual thing where you actually talk or say your own eulogy. So we know this is all happening, this is all going on, but I still think this is confusing the griever, right? Because at the end of the day, is that death really real? If you lost Uncle Louie and all you're doing is putting on a headset and not going to the actual funeral, is this kind of the same conversation we've had over and over again? Are we just on rerun? There goes the turntable. Your thoughts, Doc, after I kind of explain where we're headed, just initial prognoses.
Okay, so I got a lot of notes here. I'm writing notes down. So the first question I have to ask, just because I think we need to be very open about this, is what is the financial version of this, right? How much is this going to cost people? Is it actually going to be cheaper to run I mean, is that the idea? Is the virtual funeral for the funeral director would be actually cheaper? You wouldn't have cars, you wouldn't have to do that, right? Again, that's my first question, and then is it going to be financially available for everybody? Like, is this a price that most people can pay, or is this going to be for the the middle class to the upper class using it, right? The other thought I had is, in my just a quick little sketch I did here, pros and cons. The pro I see is the convenience of it, right? Is that even if you have, you're in the hospital, literally in the hospital, you could put on some sort of laptop or virtual reality or whatever, wherever we're going with this, and you could be there. Or they live, countries away. You could go to their funeral. I for some reason I have this idea of virtual reality is, one step away removed from reality. So the problem I guess I have psychologically is, again, this is one step away from confronting death, right? It's another way that we can hide behind either a screen or um, you know, and just not have to confront the reality of this person is dead. And again, like I said, some people need to be physically there, some people don't. We do know that, most people, we're community people, right? We want to be around people. We need that for a lot of us. We need that comfort. I worry that as this virtual funeral continues to play out, I wonder how far stepped or how far removed are we actually becoming from reality in general. I can also tell you, with all these online classes and, because of COVID and all these students not having to be in person, I'm seeing or experiencing, at least in my practice, more and more teenagers that are struggling with social anxiety. I wonder if this is also going to play a part into, again, social anxiety, but death anxiety, because the reality is that this isn't real. As much as we want to make it feel and sound, and maybe even your Kapal lenses have squirters, so maybe if it's raining out, maybe you're in a camp with the rain. Yep. Again, all of this stuff is make believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we really need to punch home that death is not make believe. So again, this is where I think that we need to be careful, because how are we going to present this in a way that we can also allow, because what's going to happen is that the funeral home isn't going to exist, correct? The idea is that you could put a green screen, put the body in front of, in a closet basically, and project anything you want behind it.
Well, and Doc, this is where I was going with this. So the first thing that you came up with is the financial, right? Obviously, this is going to be a cheaper solution. As we know with technology is evolving way faster than anything else, right? We know that I just was listening to a presentation where I think, if you know what I'm talking about, like where the Michael Jackson, where he's 3D and he like the hologram. There you go, the hologram platform. I'm just trying to spitball the memory, but this is pretty similar. Something like 7 to 13 grand, something somewhere in between there. And they're saying within the next 6 months to a year, they'll be able to put it down to 3,000. And then, let's say 2 years from now, you can get it for $300. You know what I mean? So yeah, this is this idea of, is it going to be cheaper? Absolutely. And here's the scary thing.
Yeah, but that's going to be the first gen, right? And then we're talking 30 years from now, there's going to be third gen where you can actually.
Oh yeah, you're going to be in a rabbit ball or a rat ball, and you got the full vest on. You'll be able to hug people and feel them, and
don't get me wrong. Anybody listening,
You'll have
I'm
an
not
avatar.
against technology. I think technology is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I think it is a way that we can connect the whole world, which I definitely think we need to do a better job of. With that being said, I think, unfortunately, because of the convenience of not having to wear pants and you can sit behind a screen all day, we are not able to actually socialize anymore. And I think that's such an important thing that we as humans need. So I'm not even talking about death at this point. I'm talking about just being social.
Well, here's my little thing that's bugged me for this when I'm watching this. Is this the start of the death of the funeral director in the funeral home? Because here's the thing. Think about it. You know, when we came up with self-checkout things, we've lost a lot of baggers, right?
We still have them though.
We still have them, but let's be honest, compared to having 10 baggers, we
but
have
isn't
maybe one or
that
two.
interesting? If we know that it's cost effective and it's doing all this stuff, but the reality is most places I know still have cashiers and baggers, and it's because there is some of us that will still to this day, and I'm not, especially
the
resistance, the old generation will avoid those things. And
right.
there's a reason
Right.
for that, right? They think that we need the jobs, and again,
And they want to have that conversation, right? The bagger lady and the checkout lady or checkout man, you have conversations with, right? They become part of the community, just like your local bartender or your local hairdresser. They are a part of the day to day, right? So if we lose that, if you're just talking to a machine or pushing a button, we lose that, right? We already know that there's convenience stores where there's no employees whatsoever. That's happening. So is this the start of the death of funeral directors and the death of the funeral home?
I
right?
think the death of funeral directors, and we've kind of explored this on previous episodes, and the death of funeral homes is we've lost value in them.
Correct.
So again, I don't necessarily think virtual funerals is going to be the death of funeral homes and funeral directors. The hard job is that funeral directors or morticians or anybody in that profession, embalmers, we need to do a better job of explaining to people the value of what they do.
I think this is exactly what we're talking about. This idea that virtual funerals is in some ways a great idea. It's convenient, maybe for some people who really fight with anxiety, with getting out there in the public, etc. This might be perfect for them, but for the normal person, and I'm saying normal in I know that's a bad term. I'm saying for most people, they like the community-based funeral situation. They like to be a part of the community. They'd like to be able to.
Well, and
hug,
you're
give their
saying most, and
I'm not saying.
I don't even know if we could say most anymore. I think a lot of society is changing into virtual. And again, don't get me wrong. There's some very awesome things that I think the virtual funeral is just a bonus. It's just something that it can be there for people that can't make it that day. I don't think it should take the place of, right? And that's where I think we also struggle as human beings. We get into this dichotomous thinking that it has to be this or that. No, I think it can be both. And I think if funeral professionals can incorporate it in a way that, again, it's a bonus, right? It's an add-on. It's something that we have the capabilities to do, and unless they're in Ida, Michigan, because the internet never seems to work great here. My other question, I had right here was privacy. That's going to be another question, right? Because we know that if you open this up, there's going to be a lot of interesting cases that'll come out of this.
Yeah.
Because the more and more we get to this, this virtual living, the less and less real, I hate saying this, but real reality rules are existing.
And who has the fall on this? Is it the company that makes it, or is it the funeral home that supplies it? Right? There's another thing too, right? Because there's less overhead when you're doing virtual stuff, right? But at the same time, you bring up a great thing, lawsuits. You bring up this thing where we're like, we don't know yet. We don't know what that future looks like. is it, in your opinion, for the psychology side of it, Nick, does the convenience make it easy? Obviously, it makes it easier for you not to go to the thing, but let's talk about like work, right? Can you get excused for going to a virtual funeral? It's the same as going to like a legit.
But that's a great question. How do you view, again, for some people, virtual, the virtual reality realm, right, is real for them.
I see what you're saying.
So the question then becomes, right, again, it comes down to, you're saying, can you get excused to go to a virtual funeral and sit at home and go to the same funeral that you wouldn't be able to, or you wouldn't be able to go to work that day if you went physically? So then we have to explore the question of what is reality. Again, this is where I'm saying the rules have to change. I think, unfortunately, the way that our society is that we want them quick. I think, unfortunately, that's going to put a lot of pressure on funeral professionals to even do their job quicker, especially if everything's going to virtual reality. Or virtual funerals, because the fact is that they probably don't even have to come in and see you guys anymore. They could send you an email. This is what we want. This is, I seen, Bill down the street. He was in, we had the farm backdrop, and we had, every once in a while you'd hear a pig and all this stuff, and it was great and it was awesome. And every once in a while, the breeze would come, and it felt great and it felt real.
Don't put that Farm All Red tractor in the back. Put that John Deere in the back.
We're Ida, so that was a tip. My hat's out to the
learn
Ida
your
people.
Tractors if you know.
But again, like, this is the problems. You're asking questions that, because we haven't got there yet, I think there's a lot of unknowns, right? And I think also for any profession, the unknown is terrifying. Like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be the death of the traditional funeral. It doesn't. To me, I think there's always going to be people that want that. I think what's got to happen is that, again, we have to explain to people the importance of doing what feels right, right? So, for example, like, if you think you need to have a funeral, have a funeral. If you want to do, a private visitation, VR, whatever, do it. Why can't, this was another thing I was thinking, like you said, for the celebrities, right? On one of our past shows, like, this idea of, normally a lot of families like to do private things. Maybe the actual funeral home is for the private viewing for the families, and then for the whole, the ceremony, or for everybody that they can think of that they want to be there from different states and countries, you could do VR.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think it has to be an either or. I think it can be something that we can, as a, the profession of funeral directing, like, incorporate it. Don't fight it, because the problem is that you're fighting a losing battle. Everything now is turning into online schools. Even the kids, when I went to high school, we had legitimate books. Kids don't have those anymore.
No books, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, again, this is the change, right? And you can fight it all you want, but that's, I think, where funeral directing is going to lose the battle, if they fight that, versus how do we accept this and incorporate it into our field?
No, I think I like what you just said. I like the idea of both, right? If you don't have the opportunity, you could still be a part of it. Or if the family wants to do something private, they can still have the opportunity for people to still send their condolences or whatnot. I think that's beautiful. Though it does stem, do funeral directors have to be a lot more technologically advanced? Do we have to start getting one more hat to wear?
Well, just think about this. For any other big corporations out there, or big companies or whatever, right? They have IT guys.
Yeah.
You might have to get, depending on how this technology moves, and if it moves quickly, of course you're going to have at least an IT tech guy come and explain how you're going to set up these holograms.
Absolutely.
And how are you going to, what kind of green screen do you need? And again, like, these are a lot of, it's funny. My father would tell me about this funeral home that had a drive-through. Like, you would literally pull your car up, you'd push a button, the drapes would open, you get to say your final goodbyes, and you could drive on, right? that again, some people love that because of the convenience, right? They didn't even have to get out of their car. You could go see grandpa and pick up McDonald's on the way home. Like, again, and I don't mean to be jokey about it, but like there is people out there that like that quickness. They like that speed. I don't have to take time out of my busy schedule to take a whole day off because I don't have that time, job responsibilities or whatever. I think the problem really ventures out is it's a systemic issue if we're talking about grief, because there's a lot of people that aren't allowed to go to funerals. There's a lot of people, they get a lot of pushback if they want to, spend a week to grieve their parents or whatever. And again, if we don't take better care of the grieving people, we are going to be a society that really struggles with grief because we're never going to have the opportunity to actually grieve.
No, absolutely. And I mean, this also brings up the question of, I mean, obviously your profession deals with virtual clients to begin with, obviously just like ours, but I'm sure this could be something VR down the line for psychologists too. You sit in the chair.
And I also think that between me and Benny and the four walls and everybody listening, the thousands of people that listen to this podcast, I think there is just, and this is my experience, there is just something different being in front of people. There's a feeling in the air, whatever you want to call it, of being present, physically present with someone. Again, I don't know if maybe I'm the odd man out and most people don't like that now. I don't know. But what I can say is therapy is a perfect example. There is nothing wrong with teletherapy. And I think especially during the pandemic, it was so valuable because we could help people and protect us and protect them. With that being said, I think because of that opening, again, people took it and ran with it, right? Okay, so I don't have to do any physical in-session therapies anymore. And I'm saying for both the therapist and the clients, like that's again the other issue. You might come across, maybe not you necessarily, but you might come across some funeral professionals that love the idea that they don't actually have to have a physical funeral home anymore. Less bills to pay.
Yeah, but how can you really show value of what we do?
But again, you're using personal value, right? What I'm trying to explain is
as a funeral director, as somebody who has put their life into getting the schooling and being a staple in their community, that take helping families get through the loss and the loss of their loved one, and then navigating them through their grief journey. Hold on, how do you do that if you don't get the opportunity to conversate with them at the funeral?
I completely agree with what you're saying. I'm just saying, think about this. How many funeral homes actually have a physical showroom anymore?
I see what you're...
Right? So you guys have moved a little bit more towards the virtual, right?
Right. There's a lot of funeral homes that don't even have a showroom.
That's what I'm saying, right? And for any of the viewers out there, a showroom is where you go and literally see the caskets, right?
Yeah, some people call them casket rooms. Basically, it's a room that, traditionally you would go in and there would be, 10 to 15 full caskets from all ranges of prices and all that.
And then pictures of multiple colors or whatever.
And urns and et cetera, et cetera. Now that's become, it went into the stage of you would get the corners of caskets. Mm-hmm. And now you can do everything online. You can show, but yet again, Doc, we've talked about this, especially in our little, and not yet again, this is our community. Not everything's black and white. Not every community is the same. But in our community, they want to touch it. They want to feel it.
There's value in that.
Well, and I think,
but there's also value in the funeral professional that says that's a lot of overhead.
No, that's the business side, absolutely. But I get it. But if we're trying to, I think the biggest thing that funeral directors need to do is promote the value in what we do, right? And why we do it. It's important. It helps people with grief. If we're not doing that and it's all virtual,
well, see, but then
the
again,
IT guy can become.
But what I'm saying is that you're also saying that there is no value in virtual, and I think there is.
I'm just humanizing myself that I have.
Absolutely.
I'm getting a little angry because, and I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be straightforward. I'm angry because I know the time that I put into this, and the part of myself I've given to this profession. I know what my father, and his father have put into it, and it's scary. It's scary. Anything new is scary, right? And to be honest, I think part of people not seeing the value in what we do is because we're getting away from actually doing the full process of being a funeral director. And I think part of that is out of our control. Obviously, we have to help the client in any way that they want, and we want to help the family get through whatever they need financially and physically and mentally through this huge impactful moment in their life at times. But at the same time, like, you know, I know it sounds crass, and I know obviously this is not how it's going to be, but it's like I don't want to see a funeral director, you know, like the a 3D version of myself, and it literally is like the old cassette tapes when they changed the name on the birthday tape. You know what I mean? This is Frederick Johnson, and you know what I mean? Like, no, like that's not personable, and I can't fathom, and maybe something will change, a funeral director being personable and out there. Yet again, Nick, we're putting a funeral director back in the back coves.
So the last thought before we go to the questions, Q&A session. But maybe you are that funeral director that wears that bodysuit with the little balls, and that you literally every time make it personal.
You could make a good character, a good anime character of a funeral
I'm just saying, like, you could still do every funeral and make it personal. It doesn't, again, this is where I think we got to draw the line. It doesn't have to be dichotomous. It doesn't have to be that or that.
There's a little icon pop up at the bottom right, and it says, like, ask the funeral director.
Absolutely. Wouldn't that be beautiful to actually have a sidebar with a funeral director at any moment?
It's an interesting thought.
So
it's an interesting
again,
thought, America.
We'll leave you with all these thoughts. Send us what you think. What do you think about everything kind of, moving towards the virtual? Do you think it's a benefit? Do you think it's a problem? I'd be interested to hear.
Would you want your loved one to have a virtual funeral, or visitation, or wake, or a send off, however you want it, a celebration of life,
both.
Or both.
It doesn't have to be black
send us
and white.
those thoughts at let's talk about deathpod@gmail.com. But Doc, I think it's that Q&A time.
Benny, hit me with a question.
Oh, here it comes.
Q&A, everyone loves that Q&A.
All right, Doc, here we go. I feel way closer to my grandfather after he died. I was never super close with him, but we had a better connection than any of his other grandkids. I would listen to his stories and have a nice, somewhat shallow conversations with him. He died last year when I was 16. I was never quite old enough to talk to him like an adult, which I am sad about. He was also 93 and was hard of hearing in his last 5 years of life, so it made it even harder. But after he passed, my perception of him kind of changed. I heard more traveling stories of his. He worked in an oil and traveled the whole world. I got to keep all of his coins, got 40 silver Morgan dollars of his, got his jacket. I've been doing research on the coins and the paper money, and now I think about him probably 3 times a week. I used to never think about him ever. But having his stuff and talking to people about it and really just getting into it makes me feel like he was a real person and not just my grandfather. Just wondering if anyone else had a similar experience and what your thoughts are.
So first things first, my immediate thought to this person out there asking this question is that old saying, right? You never know how good you have it until it's gone. And I think even though you may not have thought about your grandfather every day consciously, doesn't mean that you loved him any less, right? Again, this is where I think we take, as humans, we take hindsight 2020, but we use it against ourselves. We take the knowledge that we have now as an adult, as a mature person, or a more mature person than when the actual event happened, and we judge ourselves for it. So what I would say to you is be careful what you're judging yourself, because at that time you didn't know. You didn't know that, he had all these other stories, right? He was hard of hearing. It was probably very difficult to talk to him. And it sounds like you were young when this happened, right? And we all know, at least me, I have 3 and a 2-year-old right now. Kids don't have long attention spans, right? As you get older, that gets better, and through working with it and having to sit through hours of lectures, you get better and better and better at it. What it sounds like to me is you're using your adult maturity and your intellectual advancements to judge your previous self as a child. That's not fair, and you got to be careful when you do that, because all you're doing is belittling yourself. But the reality is that you didn't have all the information then that you do now. So again, we all tend to do this, and especially with grief, it tends to come out, because what you're doing is, I hear it all the time. I wish I would have spent more time. I wish I would have, the should haves. I should have done this. I should have done. Don't get me wrong. I understand that, and I completely get why that happens. We all do it. What I am saying is that the unfortunate part is that for most of these people, they did not know this person was going to die that day. If they would have changed what they did. They would have gone and seen. They would have done all this stuff. But the fact that you didn't know, and you were living your life with the knowledge that you had, and trying to, also work and take care of your own children and do all this other stuff. And, teenagers, they're involved in everything, sports and theater and all that stuff. To me, what I think in this thing, I would like to tell this person, be gentle with yourself. Be very empathetic and compassionate towards yourself. You did enjoy talking to your grandfather. It was probably just as he got older and more hearing loss and all that stuff, it probably just got more difficult and difficult. And I think that's normal, right? And especially as a kid, your attention span is not long to begin with. So again, don't judge yourself, going back and saying, I wish I would have, asked him about these stories and blah, blah, blah. Maybe it just was meant to be this way. That this person that, maybe they do, brighten your day now, or just thinking about them, or, holding that money. That's precious and that's amazing. Journal about it, talk about it.
Yeah, you mentioned you're 16, or you're 17, because you said he died when you were 16. You're going through a lot, when you're going through high school. That age, you're kind of all over the place. And he's 93. He's talking about a lot of things that are really cool, but there's a lot of things that it doesn't capture with you. And I think all in all, like, you have this, like, you're the grandkid, right? Grandpa will be here. He'll be here next year. He'll be here next year. And you kind of go on with your life. It's not that you don't love him or you don't care about him. It's just this idea that you have to kind of go on with your life. And at that point, you're going through a lot. And that makes sense that, and you say you didn't think about him ever. Well, that's not true, because you had conversations with him. So you went out of your way to at least, and I think that was your thoughts, right? You had that opportunity to ask the questions you wanted to at the time. So when he's gone, you don't have that opportunity, right? You're hearing stories and you're hearing memories that maybe he never told you about. And you even said, I wish I could have connected with him as an adult. So the more that you get older, the more you are going to start thinking of maybe some of the things that he said that maybe you didn't take interest in at the time, but you're going to take interest in then, right? It's like that whole idea when you're a kid, you don't really listen to your parents. You think they're full of marbles, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, that kind of made sense when they said that, or, oh, that's why they said that about, when we were kids, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's it. And I want to say that kids have a very different relationship with their grandparents. And I think grandparents touch their grandkids in a different way than parents do. And I think there's a fleeting part of a grandparent, especially one that loves their grandkids, that leaves little nuggets, not necessarily that the kids get right away, but they get later in life. And I think this is a perfect example with the things that he left you. And the when you go into you're looking them up and you must be into that too, which is kind of interesting to think that maybe he knew that you'd be interested in those specific items. And then maybe you're finding yourself that you're more like him than you ever thought. And I think that's kind of what you're getting into with all these stories, and they travel the world, and you never had this conversation about, adult things, because you probably wonder, would he feel the same way I do? Or did he go through very similar things? And I think it's beautiful. And I really think this is a great question. Honestly, there's a lot of people out there that have very similar situations. Nobody has your exact situation, but I've heard this time and time again that people find themselves getting closer to somebody after they die. Because I think there's that selfishness when we're living, right? It's a selfishness of, like Doc was saying, you don't know somebody's going to die. So you have this like selfish innate thing where it's like, I'm going to see them tomorrow. So I'm not going to worry about these comments I make now or these questions I ask now. You think about them after it's done. And then you're like, why did I say that? Or if I would have known that was the last time I was going to say something, I would have said something different. And so, yeah, there's a lot of people out there that feel the same exact way you do. So yeah, keep talking about it. And I'm sure, you'll even answer some of the questions that you have about this situation yourself.
It's okay to be human. That's I guess the end of the statement is that it's okay to be human. That's what we do. We don't know. We can't predict things very well.
Well, thanks for listening to us talk about these futuristic ideas, some Q&As there. And please like us, listen to us, subscribe, send, add. What else? What else, Doc?
Yeah, just give us a call.
Just give us a call
Show
on
up.
our email. Give us a virtual call on our email at let's talk about deathpod@gmail.com. And like always, if you're not talking about death,
You aren't living. Thank you so much.